U.S. President Donald Trump has banned nearly all travel from Europe to the United States starting at midnight on Friday. The ban will last for 30 days, but excludes the UK and Ireland and a few other countries outside the Schengen passport-free travel area. Trump said clusters of coronavirus infections in the U.S. were traceable to people coming from Europe. And he blamed the European Union for failing to act quickly enough to prevent the spread of the disease.
So far, the US president had made light of the corona crisis, but now Donald Trump has taken drastic measures.
My fellow Americans, to keep new cases from entering our shores, we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. The new rules will go into effect Friday at midnight. And these prohibitions will not only apply to the tremendous amount of trade and cargo, but various other things as we get approval.
The travel ban will affect 26 European countries and is set to come into force at midnight on Friday. Trump's move seemed to take US allies as well as the markets by surprise. It was quickly followed by another dramatic announcement. The NBA said they would be suspending the basketball season. Fans at a game in Oklahoma were sent home before a ball was bounced. It later emerged that a player had tested positive for the coronavirus. Officials fear that Rudy Gobert may have been spreading the virus through the league. On Monday, he appeared to make light of hygiene concerns when he touched reporters' recording equipment at a press conference. Then, Oscar winner Tom Hanks revealed he and his wife had tested positive too. The couple are in isolation and following public health advice in Australia. In an Instagram post, the actor said they were taking one day at a time and told his fans to take care of themselves.
And for more on this, I'm joined now by DW correspondent Stefan Siemens in Washington. Stefan, what are these travel restrictions going to look like in practice?
Yeah, good question. I wish I would have a great answer for you, but I don't. The president had to tweet after his address to the nation to clarify one thing, that this is not impacting any goods Europe is transferring or bringing into the United States. So he tries to minimize the economic downfall or impact of that measure. But it also has a few exceptions for Americans who are naturalized here, but also have a double citizenship, maybe European, French, German, whatever, and American citizenship at the same time. But the exact specific processes and proceedings of this and how this is going to be implemented, nobody knows. And there will be another day to find this out, I guess.
And Trump said in late February, so not too long ago, that the coronavirus is very much under control. Is that the impression people really have over there?
Absolutely not. Right and left cancellations of big events. The NBA, the National Basketball Association, canceled the entire season just now. I know this is just sports and entertainment, but this is a huge part of life here in the United States for many, many millions of Americans. So Americans feel the impact, the sudden and direct impact of the coronavirus threat and coronavirus infections which are spreading around the nations. And the president, and that's why he had to give this speech today, or his address to the nation today, did not seem to really understand that this is serious. To the contrary, he belittled and downplayed the entire threat. Well, I think this is over now.
And do you think the United States is well equipped to fight an epidemic?
No, the United States is ill-equipped to fight an epidemic. At least that's what our own or the U.S. experts say. For example, they are missing 100,000 ICU beds. The United States has 100,000 intensive care unit beds for people who are sick. But if this is going to be a full-blown pandemic, then there will be a need of double that number, and they're just not there, let alone testing kits. The United States has, compared to Europe or to Korea or Japan or other countries, not tested significantly at all.
Okay, DW Stefan Siemens in Washington, thank you for that.
The World Health Organization has declared the coronavirus a pandemic now and accused governments of, quote, alarming levels of inaction. The WHO says it hopes using the word pandemic will shock lethargic governments into taking more decisive measures. One of the worst-hit countries, Italy, has announced another wave of restrictions. Now, all shops except food stores and pharmacies will be closed to try to halt the spread of the disease.
A major airport in Milan, missing its travelers. A ghostly silence in the heart of Rome. As Italy surpasses 12,000 coronavirus cases, the government is tightening its restrictions.
Now we are closing down all commercial activities, except for grocery stores, pharmacies and drugstores. There is no need to run and buy food in supermarkets. We will close shops, bars, pubs and restaurants.
Other European countries are struggling to avoid the same fate. Greece closed schools across the country. And the Czech government banned all public gatherings of 100 or more people. Now, the World Health Organization is warning the spread of the respiratory illness, also known as COVID-19, has become a pandemic.
We're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
More than 90% of global cases are in 4 countries: China, Italy, Iran and South Korea. But the coronavirus continues to cross borders. It's why El Salvador quarantined returnees from Spain and announced it would ban all foreign visitors for the next 21 days in a bid to keep the virus out.
Well, DW's Nina Haza is covering this story for us and joined us this morning. Good morning, Nina. So Donald Trump has ordered flights from continental Europe to the U.S. to be stopped for 30 days. How is that going down here in Germany?
Well, he, of course, has announced that Britain is not part of this ban, which is interesting. But, of course, in Germany here, it's going to affect a lot of people. In 2019 alone, some 5.6 million people flew to the US from Germany. So that's a very drastic step. And we must say that an EU diplomat has told Reuters that the EU were not informed about this decision by the US president in advance. So, of course, this is probably also not going to help the already strained relations, the diplomatic relations between Europe and the US.
The head of the WHO, the World Health Organization, he's calling for more decisive action in dealing with this crisis. Several countries have imposed travel restrictions. Can we expect more drastic steps to be taken in Germany soon?
Well, you always have to remember that Germany is a federal state. That means those issues, when it comes to health, when it comes to education, when it comes to decisions whether to close down schools or whether to impose travel bans, etc., or whether to cancel mass gatherings, they are always taken at the regional level. They're not taken at the federal level. So Angela Merkel can't just go ahead and close down Germany as a whole. And, in fact, she doesn't intend to do so. That's the message that we're getting. Whenever we talk to politicians, they have recommended to cancel mass gatherings of more than 1,000 people. And some of Germany's most affected regions have already implemented that ban. And they're calling on everybody to actually ask themselves, do you really need to meet your friends in these drastic weeks? But Angela Merkel went to the media and actually addressed the public for the very first time in the crisis. And maybe we can take a look at that.
Appearances from the Chancellor at such news conferences are rare, but Merkel went on the offensive after weeks of holding back. Unlike the German health minister beside her, she hasn't visited any hospitals. Now she has stepped up to appeal to the public. Our solidarity, our rationality, and our compassion for one another are being put to the test. I hope we pass this test. But the Chancellor warned the crisis shouldn't lead to a Europe in total isolation. Coexistence has to continue, she said, a remark echoed by the health minister, who said it required discipline and that everyone would have to make some sacrifices.
For this reason, we've called for the cancellation of major events and changes in our daily routines. That means everyone has to do something for themselves and the society as a whole. The same applies to businesses, authorities, and all of us.
The message, don't panic. But the signal is clear. The situation is serious. The president of the Robert Koch Institute estimates that 2/3 of the German population could become infected, and that the number of serious cases will increase.
Local government offices, mayors and hospitals have to prepare for more patients. We're at the beginning of this epidemic, so they need to set up their plans and strategies to deal with as many of these patients as possible.
Time is of the essence now. The sooner preparations are made, the more effectively hospitals will be able to manage the surge in infections with their existing capacities.
Nina, at that news conference yesterday, Chancellor Merkel herself pointed out, in her own words, that if things don't change, 60 to 70% of the population could be infected by the coronavirus. How are people reacting to that?
I think it is beginning to dawn on Germans that the virus really is here to stay. For a long time, there was a thought we don't really have high numbers, so maybe it's not as serious as in other countries. But now people are beginning to change their behaviour. The Chancellor made it very clear that the German government is taking this issue very seriously indeed. People are beginning to think about whether they really need to travel. And then today, for example, the education ministers of all the regions, they will discuss the topic of school closures. Is that something that needs to be considered? Of course, then the argument against that is that you would also have to keep parents at home who are potentially doctors, nurses, etc., people who are urgently needed in Germany's hospitals.
The Czech Prime Minister, whose country shares a border with Germany, has accused the Chancellor of spreading panic with her statement that I just described, with 60 to 70% of the country perhaps becoming infected. What does that tell us about European coordination in addressing this issue?
Well, I believe it tells us two things. I think it tells us very clearly that, one, the German Chancellor is a scientist herself. She's a firm believer in experts' opinions. That is not something that can be said of some of the other European governments that we have in place at the moment. So she actively consults virologists. She wants to hear the facts and statistics. She wants to be prepared, and then she believes it's her duty to convey these messages to the public so that everybody feels informed and can draw conclusions from this. That is one point. And the second point, of course, is that European coordination is urgently needed. Angela Merkel took part in a video conference between EU leaders on the topic earlier this week. Maybe this step came too late, that the European Union has now decided to coordinate its efforts. But of course, again, it's an issue that every country deals with at a national level for now, and some countries have just not been as affected. So, of course, the sense of urgency has not been there, but they're trying to improve that situation, and the health ministers are going to talk to each other on a daily basis from now on.
Nina, thank you very much. And, of course, we'll keep following this story. Nina Haase, our political correspondent. Well, as you might expect, the coronavirus pandemic is having a huge impact on economies around the world. Stock markets have taken a big hit and continue to fluctuate wildly. Our financial correspondent, Chelsea Delaney, is covering the story and joins us now from Frankfurt. Chelsea, markets in Asia are looking volatile today. How are things in Frankfurt?
Not any better. The DAX has just opened and it's already down about 5%. It's really just a straight drop. The news overnight of the travel ban from the U.S. on European visitors has certainly spooked investors, but so has the designation of the coronavirus as a pandemic. So investors are increasingly worried that a recession, particularly here in Europe, where growth has already been quite stagnant, is going to be unavoidable. This has put a lot of pressure on governments and central banks to step in with stimulus. The ECB is meeting later today. They're expected to cut interest rates and provide other liquidity to businesses. But investors are just increasingly skeptical that these measures are going to be enough to stave off recession.
Let's talk about the travel industry, because it was already severely affected by the pandemic, and now President Trump has banned travel from Europe to the U.S. What does this mean for airlines?
It's going to be a massive blow. There's no doubt about that. Airlines are flying about 500 flights between the U.S. and continental Europe each day. If you extrapolate that over a 30-day period, that's around 15,000 flights. And airlines have already been hit really hard by the other travel bans to China, Italy, and other. We've seen airlines, Lufthansa here in Germany, cutting 23,000 flights next month. We've seen CEOs cutting pay, but this is really an existential threat to the airline industry at this point.
Chelsea, thank you very much. That was DW's Chelsea Delany in Frankfurt.